everyone. Welcome to the Stoa. We're going to have an intimate time today, it looks like. So feel free to turn on your camera so we can get some light in the Stoa. And we're going to be here for 60 minutes in total with a session called Stoicism and the Tactical Athlete Through Suffering to Peak Performance. And Alex Butt is here today. Alex is the director and head coach of Stoic Conditioning. And how I came across Alex, our friend Steve Beatty, who does the Stoic Breath every Sunday. He's Toronto based, and when Steve was presenting with something I was doing in Toronto pre-COVID, he had this cool shirt that just said Stoic on it. And I'm like, what's that shirt? Where do you get it from? And it turns out he got it from Alex's company, Stoic Conditioning. And Stoic Conditioning was established in 2015 out of the necessity for strength and conditioning programming specific to and cater to the government, military, and specialist teams in the UK. And he has something called like the Tactical Athlete, which I imagine we will discuss today. And the company was also inspired by the philosophy of Stoicism. So at the Stoa, in generally, I want to explore more Stoic thought. We have another Stoic session tomorrow. It's going to have an innovative approach to systematically learning Stoicism. And today is more about the physical aspect of Stoicism, like suffering, physically suffering, and achieving peak performance, which Rainbow Snake seems to like. So we're going to start the 60 minutes in total. Alex is going to present, and then we'll have a Q&A. So feel free to put your question in the chat anytime. I'll call on you, unmute yourself. You can ask your question to Alex. And if you don't want to be on YouTube, just indicate that and I'll read your question on your behalf. So that being said, Alex, welcome to the Stoa, my friend.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for the intro as well. It's pretty cool that you found us through a t-shirt as well. So I'm going to share my screen and hopefully that just pops up with the start of the slideshow. Give me a thumbs up if that's all good. Banging. All right, well, thank you very much for having me. As I said, my name is Alex Butt. I am a director of I'm just trying to hide myself so that I can actually see things. There we go. I'm a director of a company called Stoic Conditioning. It's myself and my business partner. My business partner founded it in, as Peter said, in 2015, out of the necessity, as we will discover, for training for the tactical athlete. So, I wanted to do a little presentation on Stoicism and how we apply it to our community, the guys and girls who are tactical athletes within our community, and so a lot of the main teaching points that we go through and kind of really try to impart on people and give people a good basis for. So with that being said, who am I? My name's Alex. As I said, my background is in strength and conditioning. I grew up in Africa, and I grew up kind of traveling around the world, and I've always been interested in physical competition, competitiveness, sports, any kind of like crazy ways that I can push my body through things or into states of discomfort, and like pushing onwards from that as well. That's the stuff that I really enjoy. Just trying to move. There we go. That'll do. So, when I was younger, my two main aspirations in life were to either be a professional rugby player or a professional soldier, be a professional in the military. When I was 20, I had a spinal injury that pretty much dashed both of those with one fell twist of my spine, and had multiple breaks and all kinds of neural damage and stuff like that. And it was really from that propelled me into strength and conditioning and rehab, because a lot of the doctors that I was going to see and specialists were like, you are probably not going to be able to walk again, maybe. You definitely won't be able to play sports again. And, weightlifting and rugby and stuff like that is just out of the question. And I was like, well, fuck all that noise. I must say I am British, so apologies if I swear every now and again. I'll try and keep it to a minimum. But it's a cultural thing, I hear. So yeah, I just said, I don't want to really focus on that, or I don't really want to be just that and kind of pigeonhole myself to that. So I'm going to go and rehab myself, and I did. And it was the kind of the trial and the stress of going through that injury that really made me kind of self-reflect on who I am and where I wanted to go with my career at the time, because it completely changed everything that I wanted to do with my life. I was so focused on those two things, and then to have them both shattered was like, or seemingly shattered, was pretty big deal for me at that age. But yeah, really using that mindset to help rehab myself of just taking one day at a time. My friend, one of my friends at the time, I was having a particularly bad day, kind of like had relapsed, had a lot of neural pain, was lying on the floor with my feet elevated, just like that was the only position that I could get into that was comfortable. And he was like, we were talking, and I was like, yeah, tomorrow will be different. Tomorrow will be better. I'll just keep going. And if it's not better, it's fine, because the day after, just that kind of like one step at a time mentality. And he was like, oh, it's a very stoic way of thinking things. And I was like, never really thought of that. And it like propelled me into learning more about not just being stoic and stoical, but being, the philosophy of stoicism. So yeah, managing my expectations, being kind to myself, and wanting to improve my life, and just leading that kind of stoic lifestyle. My rehab was pretty successful. I went on to compete in strongman, which I don't know if anyone has ever watched strongman, but it's pretty much this there's a really good neutral spine I've got there, eh? But it's one of the biggest sports that could probably test your spine, and there was a method behind my madness with that, in terms of choosing that sport as one to get into after my injury, because I wanted to essentially test myself and test my rehab, test my strength and conditioning. So that was me. Moving on to the company. So what is Stoic Conditioning? Stoic Conditioning was started in 2015. It was founded by my best friend, who's the co-director and is serving in the military at the moment. And what we found, or what he found, was lots of people were going to him, lots of people that he knew from the military were going to him to ask him about training and to talk to him about training methods and what was good and what was not. And hey, I found this training program from Men's Health. Is this going to be good for a tactical athlete? And it's like, get your 6-pack abs in 6 weeks. And it's like, not really. That's not ideal for someone who's going to be running around in a desert with 50 pounds of, Bergen and webbing and rifle on them. So, it was that kind of point where he had multiple people going to him, and he had the realization, it's like, hey, this demographic, these people, this community is not really being served well, even though, rugby at the time, soccer, football, American football, the strength and conditioning behind all of those is so massive and just like blown up, and was in line with kind of all the research, but the military was always being left behind, which was kind of like, you would expect them to be at the forefront of new research and new methods, but it's a big machine and it takes a long time to change it. So we wanted to get involved with that, from kind of like giving as much information as we could to these people, not just from the physical aspect of it, but also the mental and emotional aspect of things as well, which is why the company is called Stoic Conditioning and not just tactical athlete conditioning. So there's a reason why we called it, or why it was named Stoic Conditioning. Like, these are the guys that we serve, military athletes in particular, are our kind of our niche, like who we really aim ourselves towards. But a tactical athlete is kind of anyone who uses their body for their job, their physical job, and that could be anyone from a police officer to a a fireman, firewoman, someone who has to stretcher people in and out of ambulances. Like, it's all part of that like physical and laborious use of your body for your job. But where we come in and where Stoic Conditioning is really aimed is at that kind of, I suppose you could call it the tip of the spear. It's commonly known, even though that's not really what they call themselves, but kind of special forces operators is where we really target a lot of our physical training, as well as like the mental approach, the philosophy of Stoicism and things like that. And then from there, we filter down into, specifically in England, specifically in the UK, sorry, we have the Royal Marines, the parachute regiments, so we serve them as well. So you have this kind of misconception that a lot of people can have with being a Stoic and being a Stoic. And the reason why we called it Stoic Conditioning is because tactical athletes, military athletes, people in the military generally are Stoic in nature. You know, they are the people that just kind of get on with things, regardless of how much it sucks, how much it hurts. They just keep going, keep pushing through. And that is, yes, that is a Stoic way of doing things. You know, as we had this quote on our website for a really long time, we've just changed our website recently, but this was on our website for years. You know, and it's just the dictionary definition of Stoic, being Stoic, which is the endurance of pain or hardship without displaying any emotion or any feeling or any kind of like fear, pain, anguish outside of like your internal environment. And that blends really well with what a tactical athlete needs, you know, and it can be a big difference. And we teach people to recognize when they need to be one or the other or both at the same time. So I always say that, you know, we're not born with an instruction manual. The human body doesn't come with an instruction manual when we pop out. We don't have an instruction manual for training ourselves physically. We don't have an instruction manual for our emotional upbringing. It really comes through our parents, our peers, society, and what people say that we should be. So what we try to do and help people with is this moralistic framework, and using Stoic virtues of wisdom, justice, courage, and moderation, you know, not only in their physical training, but also their emotional side of things, the mental side of their role, their job, to actually like help them come to terms with a lot of the decisions that they're going to be making, but also a lot of the situations that they might find themselves. You know, being okay with uncertainty, controlling the controllables, things like that. That's all stuff that we really try and impart on people from a Stoic point of view. You know, it's Seneca that said that no plague has cost the human race more than unchecked anger. You know, you'll see slaughter, devastation of cities. He was talking about kind of how rage and anger is something that, when unchecked, is nothing but destructive for humans. And you know, that's something that we talk about in terms of emotion isn't a controllable thing. It's a reaction. It's a visceral reaction that our body has, but it's the response to that we can control. It's the gap in between reaction and response that we want to try and really tune people into and really help them with. And even just being aware of that, being aware of the fact that you have a conscious choice after your reaction, is something that, you know, sometimes people just don't realize. You know, they have an emotion and they just are their emotion. They just are their, you know, their response rather than their reaction rather than their response. And it's about, you know, feeling your emotions but not being ruled by them. And that's something that can be very, very beneficial for military guys and military athletes. So, you know, as I mentioned, a lot of military athletes will find themselves being Stoic in situations. And, you know, a lot of the people that I've spoken to who are either in the military, going through it, or even coming out the back end of it, you know, finishing their career. And I've discussed with them certain times and certain situations that they found themselves in, and they've talked about their experiences and, you know, how they've dealt with things. And it's like, actually, that's a very Stoic way of dealing with things, and a very, you know, every time they talk to me, I'm just like, yeah, it's actually interesting how a lot of military athletes find themselves being Stoic, or, you know, having Stoic thoughts in times of hardship and in times of extreme duress and stress and things like that, without actually ever hearing of the word Stoic or the philosophy of Stoicism. And I think that was, you know, one of those big trigger points for us at the beginning with the company, where it's just like, it's such a good framework and ideology for people to kind of like just start to creep into their lives, especially from a military point of view. There's so many teachings, so many things that you can be learned, that can be learned from it, ahead of having to use it, you know, being proactive with that rather than reactive with your emotions at the tail end of something, you know, that could be traumatic in their life. So, you know, there's this, as I mentioned, there's this confusion between being emotionless as well, and how emotions are bad, and the judgment of their emotions and things like that, especially in the military, being, you know, not outwardly displaying your emotions, and that leading to, you know, lots and lots of stress post career, and then having to, you know, come to terms with that through different types of therapies as well. But Stoicism teaches that emotions aren't bad and they're not good. They just are. You don't associate a judgment with an emotion. It's your response and what comes afterwards that is the thing that's in the control. So, you know, the fact that you've had an emotional response, anger, fear, anything like that, that is fine. That is not the thing to judge. And afterwards, you know, the thing that you can control, that's what you really want to focus your attention on. So to teach feelings of acceptance of emotions rather than just seeking to control them is something that's can be very powerful for someone. But we always say, you know, philosophy is one thing, Stoicism is just one philosophy, and a philosophy is helpful if it helps. So, you know, we give people lots and lots of options and talk to people about not just Stoicism, but other philosophies and other helpful, you know, teachers and teaching points. And it's always cliff note with, if it works for you, it's good. If it doesn't work for you, then don't use it. Try something else, see what works for you. So when it comes to our community, tactical athletes, specifically special forces guys, or going into special forces from regular units, day one, when they turn up on selection, pretty much everyone that turns up on day one is fit, healthy, strong, robust. They've probably been preparing for it for quite a few months. Some guys might have just been eating Pringles the whole time, but they're still pretty fit when they turn up on day one. But what we talk about is really the stuff that divides the people that are extremely successful from the people that just scrape through, or the people that go home after 1 day, 2 days, or, you know, some of these selection processes around the world can be months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. But it's your mindset and your mental strength, your mental well-being that really puts you apart from everyone else. And that can go into, you know, coming in on time from one of the tested runs, but, you know, you run in at the same time as someone else, but they are visually showing their emotion, they're breathing heavily, they've collapsed, things like that, whereas you stand there and you're controlled and, you know, contained within yourself. The staff that are going to be judging you are going to be looking at the person who looks like a bag of shit, and really looking at them and being like, well, why do they look like that, and why do you look like that? And that's that kind of another teaching point that we try to get through to people. It's like, just be contained with your emotions at the time where you need to be contained. A big thing on selection process is the ability to take feedback and criticism. Some people can take it very well. Some people can internalize it. And we teach this kind of like joint approach with growth mindset principles. So growth mindset and Stoicism, being able to take on a lot of advice, a lot of criticism. It may be constructive, it may come through pretty harsh and pretty blunt criticism, but it's the ability to take it on and turn it around and implement it can be kind of like the difference between actually making it on a selection course and not. Negative visualization, huge proponent of Stoicism, as well as positive visualization. Yes, we always want to try and visualize us being successful in things. What happens when you turn up on day one and you haven't actually, you know, you've forgotten something, you've forgotten a pair of socks, you've forgotten to actually put water in your way, or they've changed the goalpost as things happen. You know, goalposts always change. So we teach people to be prepared, almost to be prepared for it to go wrong. And there's another quote in the military that no plan survives contact. And I think a lot of people go into they'll go into processes like a selection process, and they'll just kind of like be focused on the good points, be focused on, yes, I'm going to succeed, I'm going to succeed, I'm going to this is fine, this is fine. And when they come up against something that turns around and is like, actually, you're not prepared for this, that can be, again, the difference between making it on a course and not. If you hit something that you aren't prepared for and you're like, oh shit, and it completely like flounders you, then that's going to take a moment of recovery, and that moment of recovery might be one moment too much for the staff that are judging you. When you're actually in your career in the military, the mission is more important than you, especially when it comes to things like a hostage rescue. So using Stoicism to actually channel people in terms of that memento mori, being okay with the fact that you're going to die, or not being okay, but even just contemplating it and having that contemplation of death, contemplation that you're not here for a long time, and contemplation that the mission that you are choosing to put yourself forward into could cost you your life. And it's that ability to sort through that higher learning, all that kind of like higher kind of mental capacity can be the difference between making good decisions in a time of very stressful or shitty situations, or potentially having analysis paralysis or not making a choice, which leads to bad things, bad decisions, bad outcomes. And this is from Epictetus, sorry. And he's a big one that we, obviously being part of the big three of Stoicism, but the guy suffered. He had a lot of suffering in his life, a lot of trauma, probably a lot of post-traumatic trauma as well, a lot of cerebral trauma. So, and he's talking about, it's not the thing that's troubled you, but your judgment, your own internal judgment of the thing. And, we teach that as well. We really hammer that home with guys, where it's like, you may think something of something, but realize that it is only your judgment of it, and you can change that. You have the choice to change that. So some more kind of ways that we like to try and impart some Stoicism onto our community. That concept of informed choice, gathering information, having all of the things laid out, but knowing that you'll never know everything. And ultimately, especially at that tip of the spear, the special forces guys, ultimately you're going to have to make a choice, because if you don't, the choice will be made for you in the situation, and sometimes that can be a very bad thing, lead to not only mission failure, but the loss of life, loss of your own life, loss of limb, things like that. Memento mori is a huge concept that we talk about, the contemplation of death. It's a very real and visceral thing for these guys. Every time they go out onto a mission, something can happen. And even in training, even in their day-to-day life, it's a very stressful and very hard-going lifestyle. So that contemplation of death allows people to just get through that and get past that, and be able to be okay with it as well. Marcus Aurelius says you don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't need to upset you. So not letting one mistake spiral into the next thing. A lot of times on courses, you're asked to do multiple skills, one after the other. They could be very different skills. It could be, you could be fast roping from a helicopter into clearing, rooms as in a training situation, and you can get loads of feedback as you're going along and loads of feedback at the end before you then have to redo the scenario. And it's, we're going to fuck up. You're going to make a mistake. You're only human. We are human. We do make mistakes, but it's the ability to learn from it. It's the ability to be okay with the fact that you're going to make a mistake, because that's an opportunity for you to learn. And it goes into that growth mindset, principles of every mistake that you make is just an opportunity for you to learn. Socrates says it's a travesty to go through your life without being able to see what your body is capable of. And that's really been something that I think I read that quote when I was far too young to fully understand it. But I took it on board as just keep pushing yourself. And the more you push yourself, the more you push your health and fitness, mental and emotional wellness, the more you can train that, the more your comfort zone grows, and the more things affect you less. We don't have this like discomfort creep where we're just so comfortable with our day-to-day life that the smallest thing really upsets us and throws our days out, throws our mental capacity out for a long period of time. And cultivating all of this basically is a step for our guys and girls to control and act decisively and virtuously under immense pressure and under immense circumstances that we may never experience in our lifestyle, that they experience quite a few times throughout their life. And then the ability to control the controllables, but the ability to recognize what you can control and what you can't control. And as we always know, ultimately, the only thing that you can control is your reaction. You can't control your emotions, and there's a lot of external factors that you'll be unable to control. So one of the kind of like big ongoing mission statements for us at Stoic as well, Stoic Conditioning, is to really help people before they need it, or before they even like potentially need it. We're talking about people coming out of their career with PTSD or different traumas, physical, mental, emotional traumas. We believe that potentially by laying foundations and laying frameworks of Stoicism, before people have even gone into basic training, before they've gone through the process of selection, before they've been deployed and had to make choices and see things that may cause disquietness in their body, by having these framework, these virtues to work to and to actually like hold decisions up against, it's going to help them in the long run, and it might actually like lessen the effect of traumas. And there's a ton of research being done on using Stoicism in, or just the thought process of Stoicism, the philosophy of Stoicism, in conjunction with other therapies, such as CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, talk therapies, and other things like that, to really help people with PTSD. And there's some promising studies and promising research there as well. But dealing with the choices that they've made, realizing that a bad choice doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad person. You know, a bad choice isn't a reflection on your character, it isn't ingrained on your soul. It just means that at that point there was just other choices that could have been made. It doesn't mean, you know, it doesn't need to pervade your entire life. And one of the biggest tenets of Stoicism is to flourish, to live a full life. And that's one of the main goals for a Stoic, is to live in continued excellence, to live happily and healthily, and to live with a peace of mind, strong character, live with enthusiasm. So that's something that, again, you know, coming out the back of serving in the military, it's good for people to remember. You know, they lose a lot when they come out the back of the military in terms of, you know, structure, camaraderie, and things like that. And sometimes that can lead them to spiral into, or lead people to spiral into other things. Whereas, you know, if you have a framework and that moralistic framework to work towards, then it can actually give you a bit more of a direction. So that's kind of the end of the presentation, as it were. I wanted to get into more of a discussion because, as I was saying to Peter before everyone jumped on the call, it's far more interesting to have a discussion and a discourse between people, because that's how we all learn more. But yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. I will unshare your screen. Cool. So every time, like, I hardly talk about Stoicism at the Stoa, but when we do, I get super excited and passionate about the possibility space. So I have a thought to share, and then I'll follow up with a question. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat now. Yeah, it's like Donald Robinson, one of the authors, you know, the famous authors of modern Stoicism. He told me, and this maps over to my experience too, running Stoic groups in Toronto, that the three sort of career paths that people who are naturally attracted to Stoicism, they're people in the military, people in medicine, and people who are entrepreneurs. Because they're like, you know, VUCA, I think it's called VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and then ambiguity. Those are three VUCA friendly fields, if you will. And and the world is really becoming more VUCA. So I think Stoicism is going to be needed for more and more people. But those are sort of like I guess the canaries in the coal mine that are drawn to Stoicism. And the cool thing that happens when these people discover Stoicism, they might not know Stoicism at all, but then they're like, oh yeah, I've been fucking doing this already. Now it has a name, now it has like a philosophy behind it. And it seems like that's something that happened with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just happened with me personally, as well as, with a lot of the people that I speak to, going into the military, going in through selection processes and stuff like that. It's very much that, these people are always thinking stoically and being stoic about their thought process, their mental approach to things, but they don't actually have like this word, this philosophy to follow. But actually it's even more powerful when you say like, oh yeah, actually that's in line with a stoic's way of thinking, a stoic philosophy, and they're like, oh, I've never heard of that, and then they go away and research it, and it's more like when you read your horoscope and you're like, that's totally me. It's like, well, yeah. But that's just, that's something that definitely like this demographic, tactical athletes, military athletes, I think they gravitate towards that way of thinking out of necessity more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just love the tactical athlete coinage. So my question is, Massimo Piglucci, another kind of modern Stoic author, he criticizes then the military for repurposing Stoicism, almost like instrumentalizing Stoicism in order to serve war. And I actually kind of have like a spin on that. I think you can use like military training in service for Stoicism. So it's like you can have the opposite approach. And the founder of modern psychology, William James, he calls it the moral equivalent of war. And he said, yeah, war is terrible. There's all this bad stuff happens there, but the virtues that you get for preparing to be war ready, if you will, like that's lost now that there's no war. When the time when he wrote it, and so I like kind of that idea of military training as a moral equivalent of war, that affords Stoicism. And there's something that, like as we were talking before this, like I kind of want to reinvent Stoicism in a way, like blow some life into it by infusing all these different practices. And one practice that I think is critical is just physical exercise, especially really fucking intense physical exercise. And what you do, like people like the Navy SEAL self-help guys like David Goggins, Mark Divine, similar type of thing. But there's something about really pushing your body to its limits that really affords Stoicism as a way we're talking about it. So I was wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
So there's actually there's tons to that. Obviously, it's a really good question. So I think Stoicism is a great thing to apply to your day-to-day life, but I completely agree in that, we, especially in more Western world, we are just so comfortable all the time. We never really have like extreme hardships to apply or to kind of marry up with our philosophies and how we're going to react to things. So actually using physical training, and this is talking outside of the military, just going and doing things that are hard, that are outside of your comfort zone, that are physically challenging, that are emotionally challenging. Even if it's just a walk, you can go out and walk 5 miles. Okay, cool. How about you walk 50? Like the physical nature of that will actually talk to you in terms of like, you'll have to self-reflect and how things, are affecting you, how your emotions creep in. Because, if you go to the gym, it's very air conditioned. It's lovely. It's a great environment. Yeah, some gyms. But it doesn't really take you out of your comfort zone. You're still, generally sat down doing something. Whereas, there's a Japanese word called misogi, which is hardship. It's like actually like going out and doing something hard. So, for example, that, what I was saying earlier, if you can go out and walk 5 miles, that's fine. Misogi is something where it's like, go and do something that is quite far outside your comfort zone, but isn't enough to kill you. So going for a 5 mile walk is well inside your comfort zone. Going for a 10-mile walk will be pretty much inside your comfort zone. But if you go for a 50-mile walk, it's going to take you a long period of time. And it's actually going to afford you, a long period of time. It's actually going to afford you a lot longer to go through a lot of emotional recycling of kind of like, how are you feeling about this, the hardship of it, oh, my feet hurt. I've never experienced that because I've only ever walked 5 miles. Now I've got to walk another 45 miles on feet that are starting to hurt. And like, it kind of like pulls a mirror up and just says like, physically you're a tough animal. You are well capable of 50 miles, but your mind is telling you that you're not, just because you haven't done it, but you can do it. And that's that kind of, the ability to go through a lot of physical hardship and use stoicism at certain points and self-reflect on things as you're going through it. I think could be a pretty cool thing to start to get out there.
And just to sneak in another quick question, I know the programs that you offer and then the app that you have, it's catered towards people who want to actually go into the military. But what about for just like a general audience, like someone like me or other people in the Stoa that want to get their ass kicked and then use this type of training in order to practice their stoicism? Is your programming available for just everyday people? And will you have offerings in the future that are more catered to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the moment, we've got 9 training programs on the app. 3 of them are very military specific. They're training programs specifically designed to get people through goals or hurdles in the military, a selection process. The other programs are all geared towards physical preparedness. So we have a strength focused program, a conditioning focused program, fundamentals program, and other various programs specifically designed at different things. Anyone can run those programs. Pardon me. Anyone can run any of the programs. You could go onto the app and run the UKSF program. We call it the most antisocial program that we've created, because it's a lot of training, a lot of hours on your feet, a lot of hours carrying weight, and just trudgery, like sheer emotional boredom sometimes. But that's specific to that goal. The first 4 weeks of UKSF selection is walking around Wales. And if anyone's been to Wales, it's a pretty bleak place sometimes. And you're also then having to carry a lot of weight and navigate, and the weather can be shit. So it's kind of like preparing people for that and giving them the physical and emotional preparedness for that course. But yeah, anyone can go onto the app, and we do have a lot of people from different walks of life, different age brackets. Lots of people message through to me and they're like, such and such age, I've got such and such injury, can I run these programs? And it's like, absolutely, you can run these programs. We always like try and cater things to people in terms of, giving them more individualistic advice. We don't change the programs. The programs change for the person as they're going through it. But the advice that I'd give that person to start out with would still be the same. It's like, make sure that you can do the movements, make sure you're not beating yourself up in the session. And it's to foster a mindset of longevity rather than just annihilating yourself. When we say stimulate, don't annihilate. So going into those sessions from that mindset, and that's where like the little coaching cues in the app come through, and like the emails that we send through to people. But yeah, anyone can jump on it and push themselves through the programming for sure.
Awesome. So we'll pivot to some Q&A. Kevin, you had a question.
Hey, Alex, how's it going?
Hey,
yeah, I'm curious about the sort of, you mentioned a lot of these special forces guys and soldiers, like, are drawn to stoicism, or you use it to help them. I wonder what their larger motivation is for getting into like the military. Is it like, some type of, wanting to be a national citizen and like, protect their country and their family, or like, is it wanting to like, push themselves to the limits? And like, how does stoicism fit into that? Like, for example, you said like you could run 5 miles or you could run 50, and like I wonder like, in my experience, like I sort of need some extra motivation, or like sometimes it'll be like for the sake of, just seeing if I can do it, but sometimes I'll need to draw on like, more imaginative things, like doing it for other people or doing it for something else. I wonder like how stoicism sort of fits into these people's like larger ideological structure.
It's an awesome question. I think everyone has their own why. you know, their own why for doing anything, especially when it comes to being uncomfortable and going through processes that are going to hurt. You know, there's times where you'll go through on a selection process, even just going into the army or the Royal Marines, everything is, you know, every level is different to you. But if you have a strong enough why, you can manage anyhow. That's Viktor Frankl, you know, says that, and it's very, very apt to kind of apply that mentality to people in the military. Some people that I've spoken to join the military out of, you know, not really knowing what else to do and wanting structure and wanting someone to kind of be like, you're going to go to bed at this time, you're going to go to, you know, breakfast at this time, you're going to run this many miles, and just having that structure. Some people have joined the military because they've just had, you know, that need, that want to defend, that want to go and, you know, go and serve and go and help. You know, and those people generally will find the area of military that best suits their why, their mentality. You know, as they're going along, sometimes, you know, they'll find themselves going down into like a special forces role, because they didn't realize like how much that need to defend and that love for country, that love for helping people, and that love for certain, you know, almost feudalisms, like plays into their psyche. And some people will just do it for the brotherhood and like the actual camaraderie of being in something like the military and being in that kind of, you know, close-knit friendship. And it's, you know, the brother that you choose rather than the brother you're born with kind of mentality. So I think with Stoicism as well, it can really, you know, twinning that with the contemplation of choice and the contemplation, like self-contemplation of like why you're doing something, you know, and the necessity for that striving for purpose that Stoics can sometimes have as well, I think is a big thing for military guys and tactical athletes in general. So hopefully that's not just me rambling, but it's a bit of an answer.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good answer. Interesting.
Thanks, Kevin. Nathan, you had a few questions.
Thanks. So how has the reaction been from operators in the community attaching a philosophy to a conditioning regimen? From my experience, a lot of the guys are more concerned about just going in, getting their thing done and getting out and going on to the next thing. So attaching a philosophy to it means something else to hold and to study, especially maybe in the soft community. It's like they already have a lot to think about and to learn and to train on. And I definitely think it's a positive thing. I totally do. I'm just wondering what reactions are from them. Has been positive or negative?
Mainly positive, I'd say. I think British people are immensely sarcastic, and we can basically be like, nah, nothing matters to us. But when you get someone to embrace that kind of mentality of, you know, this is going to help you in your career, then they start to research it more and start to see things that are kind of reflected in their day-to-day life and things that they can actually take action on. Because, you know, as I said in the presentation, the philosophy is only good if it helps you. You know, it's only helpful if it's helpful. And we never, you know, we're not married to one principle. We're not kind of like die by the sword when it comes to like, you must think this way and you must run these programs. It's like, do what works for you, dude. Like at the end of the day, you're the one that's going to have to go through the process. You're the one that's going to go through these situations. You're the one that's going to grow throughout all of these situations. Stoicism just gives you a bit more of a framework that you can go away and research and actually take pleasure in researching something that, you know, really at the end of the day is there to benefit your life and benefit the life of those around you and those that you love and cherish and that you're potentially doing your job for. So yeah, I'd say in terms of its how it's taken in the community, pretty decently. You know, you get the odd people that like will send through sarcastic comments, but again, it's like, that's fine. That's like, you do you kind of thing. Like, this is what we're trying to teach. And if it doesn't resonate with you, it doesn't resonate. That's totally fine.
Any follow-up question, Nathan?
Yeah. Have you had any good response from candidates going through selection process that have done your conditioning paired with Stoicism as a philosophy?
Absolutely, yeah. We've had some people who've been, we've had, unfortunately, we always run into this with something called OPSEC, or operational security. So we can't really discuss the people that have been super successful on selection processes and stuff like that. However, in terms of just feedback from people using like being introduced to Stoicism and using like negative visualization, the controlling the controllables mentalities and things like that while going through a selection process, they found it invaluable, and they've pointed to specific times where it's like, wow, I kind of like was lined up, lined up about to go into a pool, and there's 200 guys in front of me, and people are just being failed, and being told to go home. And this is day one of selection. And, it's just that like group anxiety. And if you let the anxiety of things just get into you, and it's like, hold on a second, you can control that. Like, control the controllables. Like, yes, everyone's feeling anxiety, and anxiety it's pervasive in terms of like how it can spread amongst candidates and things like that, and the stress of the situation. But be internal, be within yourself. And it's times that, feedback like that where it's been like, actually, that was really, really helpful, because, there were people that were absolute physical specimens going ahead of me who were being failed because, they didn't listen to the staff, when the staff was giving them a direct thing, and they've, put their hand on the side of the pool before they've handed their weapon out and stuff like that. And it's like, it's as simple as that. Like, if you don't follow the instructions, you're binned off. So yeah, there are, and I'm sure it's exactly the same in kind of North American and lots of other like various soft units, the selection courses for that. It's like, there are very, very definite parts where it's like a black or white pass fail kind of thing.
Thanks.
No worries.
Thanks, Nathan. Might sneak in one or two more questions. Rainbow Snake, I know you had a question.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi
So
there.
I was just perusing the website and just clicked on the UKSF training, and so it says training is 6 to 7 days a week, session length 60 to 240 minutes. I'm curious how the philosophy is woven into the physical tasks on a session by session basis, and if you have, I assume you have metrics for successfully completing the physical part, but how do you address the philosophy as you weave those together?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So when it comes to the actual training programs, there's a lot of what we call coaches tips or coaches intentions associated with sessions. So say you've gone through a week's worth of training, wake up on a Sunday, and your session is strap on a 10-kilogram backpack and go for a 4-hour walk. The way we approach that is just with instilling intentions within that session. So that will be the direction, or that will be what they'll need to do within the session. And then within that as well, there'll be intentions, as in like, the intention of this session physically is for this, the intention of this session mentally is for you to get comfortable with discomfort. It's getting okay with personal admin, like blisters, getting your socks right, things that may railroad you on a selection process, because you've got 4 weeks of walking around the hills of Wales. So if you like have a blister or a scabby toenail on day one, mentally that's just going to wear away at you. Whereas if you're physically prepared for it, mentally prepared for it, negatively visualize the fact that, oh shit, I don't have another spare pair of socks, this is going to suck, but I'll be able to get through it because I've done this in training. It's those intentions that we try and really wire people into, where it's just like, don't just turn up on the session and just go through the motions, because that's only preparing you physically. If you go through the motions, yeah, you'll turn up on day one as a physical specimen, but mentally and emotionally, there's just so much more to be gained through that physical exertion, through those physical sessions, rather than just kind of like, yeah, I walked for 4 hours with 10 kilograms and now I'm going to eat and go to sleep. It's like, no, what did you learn? What kind of like emotional responses did you have? And those are the intentions that we add into the sessions and talk about as people go along the training programs.
That's great. I love that. The programs look a little daunting for myself personally, although you never know. But yeah, I love that, setting the intentions and taking a broader view on like how am I developing emotionally,
Mhm.
and what's my preparedness. So that's great. Thank you.
Awesome.
Nathan, do you want to sneak up your follow-up question there?
Yeah, sure. I was just kind of thinking about recovery and just recovery in general, and then recovery days, and kind of pairing that with intentionality, and that, Stoicism in specifically, and how that, like, what are your thoughts on recovery and pairing that philosophy, and then like getting into the next training day, because recovery is a lot set so that you could have a better session the next day, especially if they're, say, 240 minutes long, or walking around with a 50-pound backpack for 5 miles, that kind of thing.
Mhm. Yeah, recovery is absolutely essential. We harp on about it a lot in our programming and just in the general kind of information that we give out to our community as well. In terms of like twinning, sorry, I've lost my train of thought there. Obviously not had enough caffeine today. In terms of recovery for sessions and like using that as an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to grow, we always say you never grow when you're training, you grow when you recover. Your body adapts as you recover. And it's really important to have those adaptation times, those recovery times. And what we're trying to do is like cram as much training in as possible without the detriment, without that kind of drop off, or that that critical drop off point of like, well, we're just adding in miles for the sake of miles now, or some people call them junk miles. So when we have recovery days, and we'll spell them out, like this is a rest day, focus on these points, here's your mobility tasks for the day, here's a mobility flow, go away and do this. But also we're going to be building in kind of Stoic teachings, I guess, into those recovery days, where it's like, here is your quote for the day, or I suppose, or something for you to go away, read, contemplate. Here is the quote, here's our interpretation of it. Here's our breakdown of what this quote can mean and how it can be practically applied for you and this community. And that's kind of like something that we're building in and developing into the app at the moment.
That's awesome. Thanks.
Awesome. So let's see if there's any. Yeah, I think that's all the questions. Any as we're almost at the top of the hour. Is there any kind of concluding thoughts you had, Alex, or anything you'd like to leave us with?
I suppose in conclusion, I think, as I've mentioned a couple of times, I think the people that are drawn towards Stoicism are drawn towards Stoicism. And what I mean by that is, as I think Nathan mentioned, where it's like, some people will kind of flippantly be like, oh, this is, it's namby-pamby stuff or whatever. But it's like, it's the people that are drawn towards Stoicism and actually connect with it that we're really trying to help out, and we're really trying to like almost evolve. And there was a book written about the New Zealand All Blacks by James Kerr called Legacy. It's a fantastic book. And he talks about how they developed the team because they developed the person. And the team, the All Blacks, are one of the winningest teams in the world in terms of sports, not just rugby, but sports in general. And the reason is because a lot of the Kiwi staff developed the people, developed the man, developed the, they have a saying that a better person makes a better All Black. So it's about, yes, training programs are training programs. We're not reinventing the wheel. We are condensing training into something that's very, very usable and very good for the person to use, and very prominent and specific for that role. But there's tons of people out there that have written tons of training programs that are just as good. But it's how it's applied, and that Stoic philosophy and that mentality of like, to kind of like pull the quote from James Kerr or the All Black staff is like, a better person makes a better operator. So if we can develop someone psychologically, emotionally, mentally, as well as physically, they're going to be a better operator when they get into that kind of special forces role, or even as a Royal Marine or as a parachute regiment soldier. So yeah, I think that's kind of, what we're trying to achieve with Stoic conditioning, create better people rather than just like getting someone into special forces.
Awesome. Yeah, and I highly recommend everyone check out stoicconditioning.com is the website, and I think you have an app that got released a couple months ago. So feel free to experiment with that. And yeah, I got to get my hands on one of those shirts. I will eventually. I think you sell them on your website. You're wearing one right now too, right? The Stoic.
Yeah, yeah.
It's badass.
I'm never out of my own gear.
Right. So I'll make some closing announcements in a moment. But Alex, thank you so much for coming to the Stoa today. It was a treat having you.
Thank you very much for having me.
And so we're going to have another session on Stoicism, which is rare here at the Stoa, actually. John Brooks is coming in tomorrow at the same time. And he has one of the most kind of innovative takes on Stoicism. And I don't usually invite just people to talk about Stoicism proper, but I did with him because I really like it. He's part of the High Existence crew. So you can check that out. You can RSVP on thestoa.ca. So that being said, Alex, everyone, thank you so much for coming to the Stoa today. And we'll close out with some Metallica.